sound mirror is 20 foot.
6 metres then.
So if we have, I mean, 2 tarpaulins actually will cover it. So I presume we're going to use the 7 vertical and 5.4 across.
Oh. Right.
Or are you going to do 7 all the way across and then another 7 and another 7?
No. Right, the plan is not to do the vertical, it's just to gutter above it, not to go over it. So the idea is to
We need to go to the sandbags.
That's right. The tarpaulin is only for this trench for sandbags, that's the plan.
Right.
It's just to stop water running down over the top onto it, so it diverts it each side. That's what John had in mind. Not to go over the top, because if you go over the top, it's just going to get blown away in no time.
Flap horribly.
Yeah, you see stuff that won't last 5 minutes. So the idea is not to cover up with the sound mirror, but just to actually reduce the amount of the surface water that runs down on top of it.
Usually rains when I get my camera.
It's going to be a dry afternoon. So have you taken a recording at the focal point of the mirrors?
No.
Come and show you.
Which is the focal point?
Come and show you.
I was just thinking there must be a way of testing them.
There is. Because you've got the right sort of microphone, you'll be able to do it. Have you been told much about the sound mirrors?
Not much. I've seen a picture of them somebody standing there with a microphone pointing towards it.
Oh, a picture on the
Website, but that
That's
might.
the one at Abbott's Cliff, which
Okay.
is on the A20 west
Right.
of Dover.
Oh, I see. It's not this one. Then. Okay.
This one's 1920s. This one here is the old one.
Okay.
This one is constructed in 1917,
Okay.
and at the time you had Goethe bombers and giant bombers, as they were known, from Germany, and were bombing London.
Yes.
And you also had Zeppelins. And Goethe and giant bombers flew at about 15,000 feet.
Yes.
And the angle of the sound mirror, you see it tilting back.
Oh, yes. So it's just.
The angle is right to be looking up to 15,000 feet at a range of 10 to 12 miles.
Right.
Which is apparently what the rough design spec was meant to be. So this was designed to pick up the Goethe and giant bombers as they were about halfway across the channel.
Okay.
Zeppelins flew at higher altitudes, about 20,000 feet, and the point of those altitudes was that really the British fighters at the time couldn't really get to that sort of altitude and fight properly.
Ah.
So the bombers were relatively immune for a while, and that's what led to this comment, the bombers will always get through, that started the Second World War. But anyway, the point was to detect it, and this you can see is a much deeper sound mirror,
Okay.
and the focal length is about 12 feet.
Okay.
Normally, if you can sit on here, you will find that your head is somewhere near the focal point if you sit on this corner.
Right. Okay. So
And
although
it, is
these
very,
walls,
and it is very noticeable.
so these walls were put here
Later.
later.
Yeah, these are Second World War walls, because what happens, these 2 sound mirrors were here,
Yes.
and then later the bunker was built actually in the back end of 1940 and early 41. And this is a blast wall,
Yes.
as is this.
Yes.
And these are rather plebeian. These are the toilet blocks.
Oh, they are. Yes.
So this is 2 toilet chambers.
Right.
And the other one has 4. And we believe this was probably for the officers. The other one was for ranks.
Okay.
Because this one, although you can't see it because it's all covered, there is actually a drainage thing here. You'll see there's a pipe here. There was an ablution block.
Yes.
And they drove in an adit. There's an adit behind here. You'll have seen the other side of it. We haven't yet opened it up. And the other adit, you'll see, you'll have known.
Okay.
And the adits went in, and they were dug by the 172 Tunnelling Company, Royal Engineers. And actually, there's a bit of graffiti in there with 172, with some names on the ground and show. So we know it was done by the Royal Engineers Tunnelling Company, and the idea was to have an emergency bunker for about 200 odd people with bunks, and there was an emergency hospital, emergency stores.
Yes, I'm picking up an interesting. As you're speaking, I
You can pick it up.
I can hear it. It sounds very interesting. In fact, my voice is sounding very interesting.
Yes, you can tell it is. So, and we know it was done later because when they dug that adit, they did the damage to the sound mirror. So we know that the adits were post the time the sound mirrors were useful. So we know, because initially we didn't know whether the adits were actually part of the First World War constructions. But it's quite clear now it was Second World War, and there wasn't anything. So they dug them through, and the idea was it was the emergency accommodation for the offensive guns above.
Okay.
So at the top there were 9-inch, roughly, guns.
Yes.
The idea was they'd closed the channel to enemy shipping.
Yes.
So that there were, I think, 3 guns, and there is somewhere you may find them. There's a collection of A3 sheet laminated sheets, and they've got pictures and plans of them. And there's some online you can pick up as well. And they show the guns at the top. You can still get into the magazines. There's holes under the bushes up there to get into the magazines.
Right.
And there was a camp, sort of just on the far side of this hill. I mean, 200 metres away or so. But this was the emergency one if there was counter-shelling or bombing. So this was, you have to remember when this was being used, this blast wall wouldn't be here, this wouldn't be here, this is all Second World War construction.
Yeah.
And they were looking out over there.
Yes.
They didn't actually in the end work very well. But of course, and they got superseded by radar, and of course when you're on the top of the hill, the 2 big towers you see there are remains of the chain home system, radar, Dover chain home system.
Oh, okay.
Which superseded it.
Right.
But there was a bit of it that was quite useful, which was this sound mirror picked up noise. There was another one at Joss Gap round the corner, there's one at Abbott's Cliff, and so on and so forth.
Oh, that's so
and they had to have telegraphed back the results from here to a central point where they could then get it from all the zones, and then they could triangulate where the attacks were coming from.
Oh, they did do that, right, okay.
And they did that, and of course that was the important bit, because that's what was done when radar came along. Yeah,
okay.
You know all the films of the plotting board.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and they were pushing the things, and of course those were being done by the reports that were coming from all the local stations.
Right, okay.
And so, in a sense, although the technology of this didn't work, the organisation towards having an integrated air defence system was actually very good practice for what came later.
Okay, yes.
So by the time 1939 came, UK wasn't actually all that amateurish. It was actually had the world's best integrated air defence system of the time.
Right.
And in a sense, that was the one useful thing that came out of it. But anyway, while you're here, you can probably hear. Sometimes if a ship's in the right place, you really do hear it here.
Right, okay.
And if you move your head round and you move your microphone around, you'll sometimes pick it up.
Yes, I mean, I'm going to have to have a listen to this when I play it back and see what I can... Well, I certainly hear my voice and hear your voice, and it certainly sounds very strange where I am.
You can hear the echoing, yeah.
I can hear the echo. Maybe I should bring the microphone back here.
Well, you can move it around and so on. And of course that's how they used them. They had a microphone and they moved, and so there's a focal plane. And you move the plane, and that starts to give you the angle of where something's coming from. So that was how it worked. And of course, whether it was up or down gave you the angle and the altitude.
So although this is pointing a certain direction for a certain height of bombers, you could do this with the mic.
Yes.
Feedback. So feedback. Now the reason I've got feedback is because unfortunately this camera hasn't got a mic input, so I have to use headphones on it. So it's actually...
But if you're getting feedback, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Well, that is impressive.
Okay. So...
Could there be a neater demonstration of where the focal point of this mirror is?
I mean, that's... What about further... I mean, they are there, so I don't know how that's... It's not like they're just exactly in line with that, which is really where you want them.
It's probably picking up the sea and the ship out there.
Alright, it's further back. Let's try.
I think it's probably a little bit further forward. The thing is, it's not a parabolic shape, because parabolic wouldn't work. It would focus to a point, and you don't want to focus to a point because you lose all the information. Yeah, because it then means wherever the noise is coming from, it's all going to the same point. So all that happens is you've just picked up a sound, but you've got no idea of direction. So you don't want a parabolic shape. You actually want, and this is a nigh on, I think, a spherical shape. I've yet to measure up and try and do the maths on it.
Yeah, need
Well, I
it.
think it's a sphere shape.
Mm.
And that means, of course, you have a plane, a focal plane.
Mhm.
So what it's doing is amplifying.
Yeah.
But you do get some information where in the focal plane noise is at its highest, is giving you some knowledge about the angle.
Okay, so you need that in addition to the other mirrors
Yes.
as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
And apparently when this thing was working well, they could actually hear whether the aircraft was moving away to them, whether it was turning,
Oh,
all
that's
sorts
good.
of things.
Doppler effect.
Yeah, and also
But then there's engine speed
notes.
as well, so...
There's 2 engine notes you could... But apparently they were very dischuffed because they found that the German planes didn't have the same engine pitch, so they couldn't tune it. And also the Germans cheated because they had feathered blades on the propellers,
Okay.
which also changed the noise.
Right,
So
that
there were
changed
all
the sound.
sorts of
All
technical
sorts of
issues
issues.
that failed.
Failed.
It's quite interesting reading some of the accounts in the 1920s.
Yes.
But they did have to have special RAF flights here because they found there weren't enough commercial flights flying around in the 1920s to really test the system.
Oh, I see, right, so they had to get
They
extra
had to have RAF planes
flying past to test it out. Well,
Anyway, this is one of 2 1917 sound mirrors, and the other one, as I said, is
Yeah.
1920s.
presumably they didn't modify it, they just did it, worked it out and did it like that.
Yeah.
It looks like they didn't add and take away concrete to try and correct
No,
it.
there's an interesting sort of cross level on it, but you can see there's not really any evidence of any changes.
No.
It's interesting to note the other one is much flatter. This one, the focal, effectively the radius of the sphere of which it's an element is about 12.5 feet or something like that.
Okay.
The other one I think is about 25 feet.
Okay.
We have measured it. I've got some notes of it and gives you some measurement. So to do the same thing you're doing, you'd have to stand a bit further back. This one's just quite.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got it again now.
So just,
I do get that occasionally in an enclosed space, in any enclosed space, but this is very specific.
yes, it's quite good.
I mean, I think... Ooh. Under this... I mean, I don't really know. It's quite on microphone. I don't really know where the sound, where to measure it to there or somewhere in between. But
anyway, it's quite convincing, isn't it?
very convincing.
And the other one is about 25 to 30 feet.
It's interesting. This wall has leaned itself back instead of. Well, it's obviously never.
Yeah, what happened was in the 1970s there was what they called eyesore clearance. So
Yeah.
this was bulldozed and this was damaged in the bulldozing.
In fact, it probably didn't help that pipe in there with all the rust. It's probably pushing it apart or something.
The other one, there was a similar blast wall on the front, but we've had to remove some of it when this was excavated because it wouldn't stand up.
Oh, I see.
So
Well, that's
safety
almost
reasons.
good. A good opportunity to open it up to how it would have been back in.
Yeah, a little bit. So you can see that's why it's where the wooden sign is. So
Yeah.
I think you'll find, when I was doing the calculations, I worked out that this was effectively 1/70th of a sphere.
Okay.
This here.
Right.
It's a much longer focal length. It's round about here. You need to stand to
About
see
there.
it. It's about here, about 30 foot.
Okay.
You may be able to do something with your electrical gadget,
Yes.
but it is of order here.
Okay.
Um,
About there.
about there. And I haven't got to take measures and things to be more
No,
accurate today.
but even where this gets feedback isn't necessarily.
No.
Because that's a foot long,
Yeah.
and we don't really know what it's doing, do we? Because this is just a
I think you're probably just a little bit. You need to be about a foot to your right to get it.
foot
into
to my
the-
right.
And I would bet somewhere around head height.
Oh,
It's almost
yes.
exactly 15 feet across,
Okay.
the curved bit.
That's just a bit. I must. If I speak,
Yeah.
you're right. It's just there. Have you had someone speaking, or you've been talking, and that allows you to hear your voice
Well, I've been
in that echo?
doing this a different way. I've actually been trying to take measurements of this
Yes.
to do calculations of its curvature,
Okay.
and to try and work out from there. So, but anyway, it's quite. You may be able to do better with that if you had a nice indicator on it rather than just relying on feedback.
Yes, that would mean something. I'm not getting any feedback yet.
No, but I think it's a harder one to get the feedback because it's very interesting. Here's a gadget of feedback at the focal point of the this thing. It's quite good.
Yes, I mean, I'll keep talking and see what effect it has, but I'm not hearing.
You do get it about here somewhere. You do.
Yes, but as you were talking to me, and I moved to my right when you said, suddenly my ears were picking.
Yeah, it is about here.
Oh, yes, I can suddenly.
It helps when you've got a nice, useful ship just in the right place.
Oh right, well there's a ferry coming across there. I'm not sure. Oh, there's a few out there.
When they've really got their engines chugging.
That's when they're on the way out to sea rather than.
Coffee there was not low, I was after Birmingham.
It's not as bad as
back
when I post walks into. Do that sometimes on the way back from the pub.
We couldn't, that was myself and Pete, wasn't he? He was in a ferry still. And we had to take our helmets off and duck through both of it. And the next bit.
I thought it would be more concave. I thought it would be a deeper.
Yeah, this one's quite a shallow one. The other one's much more. The other one was
Were these rediscovered, or did people always know?
They were open up to the 1970s. And then this was all bought over here as part of the
That's quite recent.
So we didn't know, we knew over here in the 1970s, but this didn't know when they bought it. Yeah.
And where are the other ones? See them down the coast.
Yeah, there's one.
Oh, you can hear it. Yeah.
Might be possible to fix it a bit.
Did he say English heritage? Oh, he's talking about the. He's talking about those not very nice mirrors near Greatstone.
That way. Yeah, you see just about 10 metres beyond there, it's a step sort of pattern
Curved steps. Come on, I need a coffee.
Join the National Trust, you can come up through.
That's what we like, Mike.
I should always think of this gentleman